But you'll see the first underpinnings of it when you start to hear, and you hear people that come here and many other places as well, when they start to see that this, what I'm calling the personal will, the personal motivation, it's an energy force, right? It's something that motivates one. This is what I'm calling the personal will. So most human beings are entirely motivated by the personal will. This doesn't mean it's bad, it's just the way it is, right? So most human beings are motivated by, will I succeed? Will I survive? That's the deeper level. Will I be loved? Will I be approved of? Will I get by? Will I be recognized? Am I happy? Is my life meaningful? See, that's the personal will searching for something to grab hold of. Am I significant? Shall we go on? You get the feeling? And the personal will, it's just trying to satisfy it, right? It's trying to basically say yes to all those questions. Yes, I'm successful. Yes, I'm lovable. Yes, my life has meaning. Yes, my life has purpose. Yes, 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 yes. And as long as we live in that state of consciousness, as long as you're there, you might as well satisfy the personal will, because if you don't, it gets very upset. In fact, it can get so upset that it gets extraordinarily suicidal if you don't satisfy its concerns and its demands. Or in our culture, like everybody just gets depressed. Everybody's been Prozac, right? Why? Well, I would suggest there's a lot of reasons, but this may be one of them. And the glimmer that this, to move from this state of consciousness of the personal is not ultimately satisfying. It's not satisfying. Not in the end. And for most people, sadly, they only come to even begin to glimpse that until they have had some success, some achievement. Maybe they've raised their kids, they've gone as far as they can in their careers, the old midlife crisis. That is nothing more than this state of consciousness when it starts to realize, I have achieved about as much as I'm going to. It's a downhill slide from here on out. You know what I mean? Physically, I'm as strong as I'll ever get. I have arisen in the company as probably as far as I will get. I have done about as well with my children as I can possibly do. Their lives as their own. So all the personal will stuff has, usually at that point, I have long ago, left my best looks behind me. Right? And so there's not so much hope, right? Aren't you glad you came tonight? And so, as I've said, at that point, sadly, at least I don't know what women do so much, but, men, they start buying like 57 Chevys and redoing them, or, they redo whatever they were doing in high school or in some other earlier part of life that seemed more satisfactory, right? Only to find out that, once you got your Chevy all lined up and it looks cool and everything, you realize that you're pretty much the only one that cares. And the other guys that are about in the same age group that are doing the same thing, and that runs out. So this is actually a very natural process that even way before we get into any sort of spiritual work, it is happening. The limitations of the personal show themselves up in life, and human beings, by and large, defend themselves against seeing this with everything they have. Every ounce of blood, sweat, and tears goes into defending themselves against this. And it survives right into the spiritual world. Don't deceive yourself, right? Well, the 57 Chevy didn't do it, and raising the wonderful children and having a wonderful mate, or maybe, failing at all that. But I know when I have the right spiritual experience, it's going to make it all right. It's the personal will, right? Everything will be okay for me when I get to that plateau, when I become like the enlightened ones, when I happens. And although it seems like I'm painting this in a negative light, as far as I'm concerned, this is just a part of human development. It's not wrong. It shouldn't be looked in positive or negative terms, as in right or wrong terms. It's just human development stuff. It's just what happens. But really, when you really have a real glimpse into the truth of your nature, this diminishment of the personal will really, really, really gets cranked up. Unless you really, really, really fight against it. And as I said, most people do. One of the reasons it's so little understood. It's so unexpected. Because in many people's minds, their realization can be seen in their own minds as a point of success. You don't know that you're being set up for the ultimate fall. You don't know that you're being set up so that this game is not about you or me achieving the grand state of enlightenment. Because the grand state of enlightenment is something completely different than anybody could ever imagine. You can't imagine it. You can imagine the personal will's ideal of it, what it hopes it will be. But you can't imagine it as it actually is. And so as this ebbing away happens, if you resist it, it can be quite terrible, quite disorienting. What's happening to my life? What's happening to my motivation? I used to have so much motivation. Where's my passion? Does it ring any bells for anybody? Where's my passion? I used to be a passionate person. I had things that I had ideas that I was passionate about. I had people I was passionate about. I had hobbies that I was passionate about. And it's all just falling apart. And what in the hell is happening? Does this resonate for anybody? Okay, good. And of course, coming up to spiritual realization, I don't mean it as higher or lower, but just as a way of talking, coming up to that point where you realize your true nature, it has lots of pitfalls. Many, 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 many cul-de-sacs they get caught in. You know, basically they're just cul-de-sacs of spiritual entertainment rather than actually seeking the truth. But on the other side of realization, there's actually much more pitfalls, and they're a lot more dangerous. How's that? That sounds fun, doesn't it? Because this ebb can get interpreted, and often does, in the mind in some very negative ways, destructive ways, right? Because the mind can only interpret this diminishment of its passion in a negative way. And so there's many cul-de-sacs and there's many places that one can get stuck that you really, 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 really don't want to get stuck in. There are lots of ways the mind will very negatively interpret what's happening. And that's one of the reasons I'm giving this talk, so maybe the mind won't do that so much. Because this isn't a negative process at all. It's totally natural. It's coming into a new way of being. That new way of being starts with the realization of your true nature. That new way of being really flowers with the diminishment of this personal will.